Good day, everyone. This is RICHEL and ABARICO. In previous discussion, we discussed about Freud, Jung, and Adler's of psychoanalytic theories. In this session, we will focus the discussion to Horney's psychoanalytic social theory. I'm going to discuss with this topic outline and the rest will be tackled with my group mates. First, please mark these true or false as they apply to you. These questions represent 10 important needs proposed by Karen Horney. We discussed these items in the section on neurotic needs. Please know that marking an item in the direction of neurotic needs does not indicate that you are emotionally unstable or driven by neurotic needs. Let's tackle a quick overview of Horney's psychoanalytic social theory. What is psychoanalytic social theory? Psychoanalytic social theory was built on the assumption that social and cultural conditions, especially childhood experiences, are largely responsible for shaping personality. People who do not have their needs for love and affection satisfied during childhood develop basic hostility toward their parents and, as a consequence, suffer from basic anxiety. Horney theorized that people combat basic anxiety by adopting one of three fundamental styles of relating to others. First, moving toward people, moving against people, moving away from people. Normal individuals may use any of these modes of relating to other people, but neurotic are compelled to rigidly rely on only one. Their compulsive behavior generates a basic intrapsychic conflict that may take the form of either an idealized self-image or self-hatred. Self-image is expressed as neurotic search for glory, neurotic claims, neurotic pride, while self-hatred is expressed as either self-contempt or alienation from self. This chapter looks at Horney's basic theory of neurosis, compared his ideas to Freud, examines her view on feminine psychology, and briefly discusses her ideas on psychotherapy. And that will be discussed furthermore. Always remember that Horney's views on her personality are reflection of her life experiences. The introduction of psychoanalytic social theory. The early writings of Karen Horney, like those of Adler, Jung, and Klein, have a distinctive Freudian flavor. Like Adler and Jung, she eventually became disenchanted with orthodox psychoanalysis and constructed a revisionist theory that reflected her own personal experiences, clinical and otherwise. Although Horney wrote nearly exclusively about neurosis and neurotic personalities, her work suggests much that is appropriate to normal, healthy development. Culture, especially in early children experiences, plays a leading role in shaping human personality, either neurotic or healthy. Horney then agreed with Freud that early childhood traumas are important, but she differed from him in her insistence that social rather than biological forces are paramount in personality development. Horney and Freud's compared. Horney criticized Freud theories on several accounts. First, she cautioned that strict adherence to orthodox psychoanalysis would lead to stagnation in both theoretical thought and therapeutic practice. Second, Horney objected to Freud's ideas on feminine psychology, a subject we return to later. Third, She stressed the view that psychoanalysis should move beyond instinct theory and emphasize the importance of cultural influences in shaping personality. According to Horney, man is ruled not by the pleasure principle alone but by two guiding principles: safety and satisfaction. Similarly, she claimed that neuroses are not the result of instincts but rather the person's attempt to find paths through wilderness full of unknown dangers. This wilderness is created by society and not by instincts or anatomy. Despite becoming increasingly critical to Freud, Horney continues to recognize his perspective and insights. In general terms, she held that Freud's explanation result in a pessimistic concept of humanity based on innate instincts and the stagnation of personality. In contrast, her view of humanity is an optimistic one and is centered on cultural forces that are amenable to change. The impact of culture. Although Horney did not overlook the importance of genetic factors, she repeatedly emphasized cultural influences as the primary basis for both neurotic and normal personality development. She also contended modern culture as based on competition among individuals. According to Horney, everyone is real or potential competitor of everyone else. Competitiveness and the basic hostility it spawns result in feeling of isolation. These feelings of being alone in a potentially hostile world lead to intensified needs for affection, which in turn cause people to overvalue love. As a result, many see love and affection as the solution for all their problems. Genuine love, of course, can be a healthy, growth-producing experience, but the desperate need for love, such as that shown by Horney herself, provides a fertile for the development of neuroses. Rather than benefiting from the need for love, neurotics strive in pathological ways to find it. Their self-defeating attempts result in low self-esteem, increased hostility, basic anxiety, more competitiveness, and a continuous excessive need for love and affection. According to Horney, Western society contributes to this vicious circle in several respects. First, people of this society are imbued with the cultural teachings of kinship and humility. These teachings, however, run contrary to another prevailing attitude, namely aggressiveness and the drive to win or be superior. Second, society's demands for success and achievement are nearly endless, so that even when people achieve their material ambitions, additional goals are continually placed before them. Third, Western society tells people that they are free, that they can accomplish anything through hard work and perseverance. In reality, however, the freedom of most people is greatly restricted by genetics, social position, and the competitiveness of others. These contradictions, all stemming from cultural influences rather than biological ones. The importance of childhood experiences. Horney believed that neurotic conflict can stem from almost any development stage, but childhood is the age from which the vast majority of problems arise. A variety of traumatic events such as sexual abuse, beatings, open rejection, or pervasive neglect may leave their impressions on a child's future development. But Horney insisted that these debilitating experiences can almost invariably be traced to lack of genuine warmth and affection. Horney's own lack of love from her father and her close relationships with her mother must have had a powerful effect on her personal development as well as on her theoretical ideas. Horney hypothesized that a difficult childhood is primarily responsible neurotic needs. These needs become powerful because they are the child's only means of gaining feelings of safety. Nevertheless, no single early experience is responsible for later personality. Horney cautioned that the sum total of childhood experiences brings about a certain character structure or rather starts in its development. Later attitudes to others then are not repetitions of infantile ones but emanate from the character structure, the basis of which is late childhood. Although later experiences can have an important effect, especially in normal individuals, childhood experiences are primarily responsible for personality development. People who rigidly repeat patterns of behavior do so because they interpret new experiences in a manner consistent with those established patterns rather. For further explanation, my groupmates will be discussed these topics.
Basic hostility and basic anxiety. Horney in 1950 believed that each person begins life with the potential for healthy development. But like other living organisms, people need favorable conditions for growth. This condition must include a warm and loving environment, yet one that is not overly permissive. Children need to experience both genuine love and healthy discipline. Such conditions provide them with feelings of safety and satisfaction, and permits them to grow in accordance with their real self. A multitude of adverse influences may interfere with this favorable condition. Primary among these is the parents' inability or unwillingness to love their child because of their own neurotic needs. Parents often dominate, neglect, overprotect, reject, and overindulge. If parents do not satisfy the child's needs for safety and satisfaction, the child develops feelings of basic hostility towards the parents. Basic hostility, it is an effect of basic evil. Horney described it as a bad attitude which develops in the child as a result of basic evil, such as parental abuse. The child is mistreated and becomes angry, but can do nothing as he is depending upon the very person who mistreat him. However, children seldom overly express this hostility as rage. Instead, they repress this hostility towards their parents and have no awareness of it. Repressed hostility then leads to profound feelings of insecurity and a vague sense of apprehension. This condition is called basic anxiety. Basic anxiety, Horney 1950 defined as a feeling of being isolated and helpless in a world conceived as potentially hostile. Horney in 1937, she gave a more graphic description calling basic anxiety a feeling of being small, insignificant, helpless, deserted, endangered, in a world that is out to abuse, cheat, attack, humiliate, betray, and envy. Horney in 1937 believed that basic hostility and basic anxiety are inextricably interwoven. Hostile impulses are the principal source of basic anxiety, But basic anxiety can also contribute to feelings of hostility. As an example of how basic hostility can lead to anxiety. Horney in 1937 wrote about a young man with repressed hostility who went on a hiking trip on the mountains with a young woman with whom he was deeply in love. His repressed hostility, however, also led him to become jealous of the woman. While walking on a dangerous mountain pass, the young man suddenly suffered a severe anxiety attack in the form of rapid heart rate and heavy breathing. The anxiety resulted from a seemingly inappropriate but conscious impulse that pushed the young woman over the edge of the mountain pass. In this case, uh, basic hostility lead to severe anxiety, but anxiety and fear can also lead to strong feeling of hostility. Children who feel threatened by their parents develop a reactive hostility in defense of that threat. This reactive hostility in turn may create additional anxiety, thus completing the interactive circle between hostility and anxiety. Horney in 1937 contended that it does not matter whether anxiety or hostility has been the primary factor. The important point is that the reciprocal influence may intensify a neurosis without a person experiencing any additional outside conflict. Basic anxiety itself is not a neurosis, but it is the nutritive soil out of which a definite neurosis may develop at any time. Is constant and relenting needing on particular stimulus such as taking a test in a school or giving speech. It permeates all relationship with others and leads to unhealthy ways of trying to cope with people. Horney in 1937 originally identified four general ways that people protect themselves against these feelings of being alone in potentially hostile world. The first is affection, a strategy that does not always lead to authentic love. In their search for affection, some people may try to purchase love with self-effacing compliance, material goods, or sexual favors. The second protective device is submissiveness. Neurotics may submit themselves either to people or to institutions such as an organization or a religion. Neurotics who submit to other person often do so in order to gain affection. Neurotics may also try to protect themselves by striving for power, prestige, and possession. Power is a defense against the real or imagined hostility of others and take the form of tendency to dominate others. Prestige is the protection against humiliation and is expressed as a tendency to humiliate others. Position act as a buffer against destitution and poverty and manifests itself as a tendency to deprive others. The fourth protective mechanism is the withdrawal. Neurotics frequently protect themselves against basic anxiety either by developing an independence from others or by becoming emotionally detached from them. These protective devices did not necessarily indicate a neurosis, and Horn I believe that all people use them to some extent. They become unhealthy when people feel compelled to rely on them and are thus unable to employ the variety of interpersonal strategies. Compulsion, then, is the salient characteristic of all neurotic drives, compulsive drives. Compulsive drive. Neurotic individuals have the same problem that affects normal people, except neurotics experience them to a greater degree. Everyone uses the various protective devices to guard against the rejection, hostility, and competitiveness of others. But whereas normal individuals are able to use a variety of defensive maneuvers in a somewhat useful way, neurotics compulsively repeat the same strategy in an essentially unproductive manner. Horney 1942 insists that neurotics do not enjoy misery and suffering. They cannot change their behavior by free will but must continually and compulsively protect themselves against basic anxiety. This defensive strategy traps them in a vicious circle in which their compulsive needs to reduce basic anxiety leads to behavior that perpetuate low self-esteem, generalized hostility, inappropriate striving of power, inflated feelings of superiority, and persistent apprehensions, all of all of which result in more basic anxiety. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Rhea, and in this slide I am going to talk about the psychoanalytical social theory by Karen Horney. This topic will help you to identify the differences between neurotic needs and neurotic trends. So, when we say neurotic needs, it is an excessive drive or demand that may arise out of the strategies individuals use to defend themselves against basic anxiety. We have here the neurotic trends. It is an individual's choice of strategy to counteract basic anxiety. Horney felt that neuroticism was a result of negative emotions that causes basic anxiety. It could be depression or anxiety that usually form in our interpersonal relationship. Sometimes we could feel overprotective, underprotected, or sometimes isolated. We could also feel that our needs were not met based on our negative emotions. These are the 10 categories of neurotic needs that characterize neurotics in their attempts to combat basic anxiety. The first one is the neurotic needs for affection and approval. So maybe we are looking for everyone to like us, seek everyone to like us, like our existence relies on their approval. This type of people are extremely sensitive to criticism and judgments. The second one is the neurotic need for a powerful partner. Neurotics thinks that having a partner would solve every problems. They are reliant and dependent. The third one is the neurotic need to restrict one's life within a narrow border. Neurotics tries to hide themselves as long as possible from the world, and they usually underestimate their abilities and talents. And the fourth one is the neurotic need for power. In these needs, neurotics despise weakness. They tries to be on top but afraid of failure. The fifth one is the neurotic need to exploit others. These types of people are only looking for what they can gain from others, and they will try to manipulate people to fill in their own desires. Next is the neurotic need for social recognition or prestige. Neurotics focuses on recognition or public attention, and fearful of being a product of embarrassment. Seventh is the neurotic need for personal admiration. This type of people have an exaggerated self-view, and what interests me is they are want to be admired for the persona that they actually made and not for what they are. Maybe this one is a narcissist. Eight is the neurotic need for ambition and personal achievement. Neurotics are not contented for what they already gain. They want to achieve more and more and more and more. This type of people prioritize their achievements than anything else. Ninth is the neurotic need for self-sufficiency and independence. Neurotics feels independency, wanting no people around them because they think they can stand alone without others. The last one is the neurotic need for perfection and unsayability. In this one, people are concerned more with their mistakes and constantly checking themselves if they are doing great, if they have imperfections, because they don't want to be mistaken, because they want to be perfect and always want to be on top. Neurotic trends is an individual's choice of strategy to counteract basic anxiety. According to Karen Horney, there are three categories of neurotic needs. First is the need to move towards people where we look for admiration and affection. Second is the need to move away from people where you can feel like you are antisocial or different from others, trying to hide yourself from the actual world. Lastly is the need to move against people. This is characterized as the need to control people, manipulate, and go against them. So I have an example here, and maybe you can study this with yourself to give yourself more knowledge about this topic. This category is utilized by all people. Well, actually, being neurotic is normal, but what makes it more alarming is if we can no longer control our emotional status and if it becomes the problems to deal with. I hope you learned something from me. Thank you.
Moving toward people and moving against people. Moving toward people. Horney's concept of moving toward people does not mean moving toward them in the spirit of genuine love. Rather, it refers to a neurotic need to protect oneself against feelings of helplessness. In their attempts to protect themselves against feelings of helplessness, compliant people employ either or both of the first of two neurotic needs, that is, they desperately strive for affection and approval of others, or they seek a powerful partner who will take responsibility for their lives. Horney referred to these needs as morbid dependency, a concept that anticipated the term codependency. The neurotic trend of moving toward people involves a complex of strategies. It is a whole way of thinking, feeling, acting, a whole way of life. Horney also called it a philosophy of life. Neurotics who adopt this philosophy are like to see themselves as loving, generous, unselfish, humble, and sensitive to other people's feelings. They are willing to subordinate themselves to others, to see others as more intelligent or attractive, and to rate themselves according to what others think of them. Moving against people. Just as compliant people assume that everyone is nice, aggressive people take for granted that everyone is hostile. As a result, they adopt the strategy of moving against people. Neurotically aggressive people are just as compulsive as compliant people are, and their behavior is just as much prompted by basic anxiety, rather than moving toward people in a posture of submissiveness and dependence. These people move against others by appearing tough or ruthless. They are motivated by a strong need to exploit others and to use them for their own benefit. They seldom admit their mistakes and are compulsively driven to appear perfect, powerful, and superior. 5 of the 10 neurotic needs are incorporated in the neurotic trend of moving against people. They include the need to be powerful, to exploit others, to receive recognition and prestige, to be admired, and to achieve. Aggressive people play to win, rather than for the enjoyment of the contest. They may appear to be hardworking and resourceful on the job, but they take little pleasure in the work itself. Their basic motivation is for power, prestige, and personal ambition. In the United States, the striving for these goals is usually viewed with admiration. Compulsively aggressive people, in fact, frequently come out on top in many endeavors valued by the American society. They may acquire desirable sex partners, high-paying jobs, and the personal admiration of many people. Horney said that it is not to the credit of the American society that such characteristics are rewarded, while love, affection, and the capacity for true friendship, the very qualities that aggressive people lack, are valued less highly. Moving toward others and moving against others are, in many ways, polar opposites. The compliant person is compelled to receive affection from everyone, whereas the aggressive person sees everyone as a potential enemy. For both types, however, the center of gravity lies outside the person. Both need other people. Compliant people need others to satisfy their feelings of helplessness. Aggressive people use others as a protection against real or imagined hostility. With the third neurotic trend, in contrast, other people are lesser importance.
In continuation to the first two neurotic trends established by Karen Horney, moving away from people is a neurotic trend wherein an individual behave in a detached manner in order to solve the conflict of isolation. This strategy is an expression of needs for privacy, independence, and self-sufficiency. All neurotics possess a need to feel superior, but detached persons have an intensified need to be strong and powerful. Thus, they compulsively drive themselves to move away from people in order to gain autonomy and separateness. They shun social commitments, but their greatest fear is to need other people. According to Horney in 1945, their basic feelings of isolation can be tolerated only by the deceptive belief that they are perfect and therefore beyond criticism. They dread competition, fearing a blow to their illusory feelings of superiority. Instead, they prefer that their hidden greatness be recognized without any effort on their part. In summary, each of the three neurotic trends has an analogous set of characteristics that describe normal individuals. In addition, each of 10 neurotic needs can be easily placed within the three neurotic trends. Here is a table of summary of Horney's neurotic trends. Toward people or the compliant personality has a basic conflict or source of neurotic trend of feelings of helplessness. Against people or the aggressive personality is a basic conflict of protection against hostility of others, while away from people or the detached personality has a basic conflict of feelings of isolation. The compliant personality type has a neurotic need for affection and approval, powerful partner, and narrow limits to life. The against people or the aggressive personality has a neurotic need for power, exploitation, recognition and unassailability, personal admiration, and personal achievement. While the away from people or the detached personality has a neurotic need for self-sufficiency and independence, and perfection and prestige. The normal analog for the compliant personality is being friendly and loving, while for the aggressive personality, it is being able to survive in a competitive manner. Lastly, the detached personality has a normal analog of autonomous and serene. Intrapsychic conflicts. Intrapsychic processes originate from interpersonal experiences, but as they become part of a person's belief system, they develop a life of their own, an existence separate from the interpersonal conflicts that gave them life. This section looks at two important intrapsychic conflicts, the idealized self-image and self-hatred. Briefly, The idealized self-image is an attempt to solve conflicts by painting a godlike picture of oneself, while self-hatred is an interrelated yet equally irrational and powerful tendency to despise one's real self. The idealized self-image, an extravagantly positive view of oneself that exists only in a person's personal belief system, in hopes to acquire a stable sense of identity. Horney believed that human beings, if given an environment of discipline and warmth, will develop feelings of security and self-confidence, and a tendency to move toward self-realization. Unfortunately, negative influences often impede people's natural tendency toward self-realization, a situation that leaves them with feelings of isolation and inferiority. These people endow themselves with infinite powers and unlimited capabilities. They see themselves as a hero, a genius, a supreme lover, a saint, a god. Neurotics glorify and worship themselves in different ways. Compliant people see themselves as good and saintly. Aggressive people build an idealized image of themselves as strong, heroic, and omnipotent. And detached neurotics paint their self-portraits as wise, self-sufficient, and independent. As the idealized self-image becomes solidified, neurotics begin to believe in the reality of that image. Rather than growing toward self-realization, they move toward actualizing their idealized self. Horney, in 1950, recognized three aspects of the idealized image. 1. The neurotic search for glory. 2. Neurotic claims. And 3. Neurotic pride.
Hello, good day everyone. My name is ARIOLA. In the next topic under psychoanalytic social theory is the neurotic search for glory. According to Karen Horney, as neurotics come to believe in the reality of their ideal self, they begin to incorporate it into all aspects of their lives. That includes their goals, their self-concept, and the relations with others. Thus, according to Horney, the neurotic search for glory is the comprehensive drive towards actualizing the ideal self. Also, it could mean the tyranny of the should, which we will discuss later. In addition to self-idealization, the neurotic search for glory includes three other elements. That includes the needs for perfection, neurotic ambition, and the drive towards a vindictive triumph, which we will elaborate later on. When we say the need for perfection, it means to drive to mold the whole personality into the idealized self. Neurotics are not content to merely make a few alterations. Nothing short of complete perfection is acceptable to them. They try to achieve perfection by erecting a complex set of shoulds and should not, which Horney referred to this drive as the tyranny of the should. It means striving toward an imaginary picture of perfections. Neurotics unconsciously tell themselves, forget about the disgraceful creature you are actually, this you should be. Now the second element is neurotic ambition. That is the compulsive drive towards superiority. Although neurotics have an exaggerated need to excel in everything, they ordinarily channel their energies into their activities that are most likely to bring success. This drive therefore may take several different forms during a person's lifetime. One best example is while in still school, a girl may direct her neurotic ambition towards being the best student at school. Later, she may be driven to excel in business or to raise the very best show dogs, for example. Neurotic ambition may also take a less materialistic form, such as being the most saintly or most charitable person in the community. Now, the last element would be the drive towards a vindictive triumph. Actually, among these elements, drive towards a vindictive triumph is probably the most dangerous because it is the most destructive element of all. The need for a vindictive triumph may be disguised as a drive for achievement or success, but the main aim is to actually put others to shame or defeat them through one's very success or to attain power to inflict suffering on them, mostly of a humiliating kind. The drive for a vindictive triumph grows out of the childhood desires to take revenge for a real or imagined humiliation. That's according to Horney. No matter how successful neurotics are in vindictively triumphing over others, they never lose their drive for a vindictive triumph. Instead, they increase it with each victory. Now, every success raises the fear of defeat and increases their feelings of grandeur, thus solidifying their need for further vindictive triumphs. Now, the second aspect of the idealized image is the neurotic claims. In their search for glory, neurotic build a fantasy world, a world that is out of sync with the real world. Believing that something wrong with the outside world, they proclaim that they are special and therefore entitled to be treated in accordance with their idealized view of themselves. Because these demands are very much in accord with their ideal self, they fail to see that their claims of special privileges are unreasonable. Neurotic claims grow out of normal needs and wishes, but they are quite different when normal wishes are not fulfilled. People become understandably frustrated, but when neurotic claims that are not met, neurotics become indignant and unable to comprehend why others have not granted their claims. The difference between normal desires and neurotic claims is illustrated by a situation in which many people are waiting in line for movie tickets for a popular movie. Most people near the end of the line might wish to be off the front, and some of them may even try to probably cheat to get a better position. Nevertheless, these people know that they don't really deserve to cut ahead of others. Meanwhile, neurotic people, on the other hand, they may try or resort to cheating and whatnot, but they think, or at the back of their mind, they believe that they deserve it, that they deserve to be seated in the front because they feel like they are entitled to it based on their self idealized image. So, like what I said, one of the neurotic claims is that they proclaim that they are special and therefore entitled to be treated in accordance to their idealized self image.
Now we're done with the two aspects of the idealized self image that are mentioned. let's proceed to the third and the last aspect of idealized self-image, which is the neurotic pride. Neurotic pride is a false pride based not on a realistic view of the true self, but on a spurious or false image of the idealized self. It is different from healthy pride or realistic self-esteem. Genuine self-esteem is based on realistic attributes and accomplishments, is generally expressed with quiet dignity. Neurotic pride, on the other hand, is based on an idealized image of the self and is usually loudly proclaimed in order to protect and support a glorified view of a person to his or herself. Neurotics imagine themselves to be glorious, wonderful, and perfect. So when others fail to treat them with special consideration, their neurotic pride is hurt. To prevent the hurt, they avoid people who refuse to yield to their neurotic claims, and instead, they try to become associated with socially prominent and prestigious institutions and acquisitions. After the idealized self-image, let's move on to the next intrapsychic conflicts, which is the self-hatred. Self-hatred is an interrelated yet equally irrational and powerful tendency to despise one's real self. People with a neurotic search for glory can never be happy with themselves because when they realize that their self does not match the insatiable demands of their idealized self, they will begin to hate and despise themselves. According to Horney, there are 6 major ways in which people express self-hatred: relentless demands on the self, merciless self-accusation, self-contempt, self-frustration, self-torment, and self-destructive actions and impulses. The first one, self-hatred may result in relentless demands on the self. Some people make demands on themselves that don't stop even when they achieve a measure of success. These people continue to push themselves toward perfection because they believe that they should be perfect. The second mode of expressing self-hatred is merciless self-accusation. People constantly berate themselves. Self-accusation may take a variety of forms, from obviously grandiose expressions such as taking responsibility for national disasters to questioning the virtue of their own motivations. For the third one, self-hatred may take the form of self-contempt. This might be expressed as belittling, disparaging, doubting, discrediting, and ridiculing oneself. Self-contempt prevents people from striving for improvement or achievement. The fourth expression of self-hatred is self-frustration. It involves postponing or foregoing pleasurable activities in order to achieve reasonable goals. For example, people with self-frustration often say that I must not strive for a better job because I'm not good enough for it. For the fifth, self-hatred may be manifested as self-torment or self-torture. Although self-torment can exist in each of the other forms of self-hatred, it becomes a separate category when people's main intention is to inflict harm or suffering on themselves. Some people attain masochistic satisfaction by anguishing over a decision, exaggerating the pain of a headache, cutting themselves with a knife, starting a fight that they are sure to lose, or inviting physical abuse. The sixth and the last form of self-hatred is self-destructive actions and impulses. This could be either physical or psychological, conscious or unconscious, acute or chronic, carried out in action, or enacted only in the imagination. Overreacting abusing alcohol and other drugs, working too hard, driving recklessly, and suicide are common expressions of physical self-destruction. People with this type of self-hatred may also attack themselves psychologically. For example, quitting a job just when it begins to be fulfilling, breaking off a healthy relationship in favor of a neurotic one, or engaging in promiscuous sexual activities.
And now let us move to feminine psychology of Karen Horney. As a woman trained in the masculine psychology of Freud, Horney gradually realized that the traditional psychoanalytic view of women was skewed. She then set forth her own theory, one that rejected several of Freud's basic ideas. For Freud, men and women's psychic differences is result of anatomy, but Horney's views of it is cultural and social expectations. Men who subdue and rule women and women who degrade or envy men do so because of the neurotic competitiveness. Speaking of neurotic competitiveness, it is a major aspect of contemporary culture. Horney defined it as an indiscriminate need to win at all costs. The feeling toward life of the person manifesting this need can be compared to that of a jockey in a race, for whom only one thing matters, whether he is ahead of the others. Although Horney recognized the existence of the Oedipus complex, she insisted that it was due to certain environmental conditions and not to biology. If it were the result of anatomy, as Freud contended, then it would be universal. Instead, she held that it is found only in some people and is an expression of the neurotic need for love. Even when there is a sexual aspect to these behaviors, the child's main goal is security, not sexual intercourse. Horney found that concept of penis envy less tenable. Penis envy, in Horney's view, essentially a sociocultural phenomenon in which women are indoctrinated to see themselves as inferior and men as superior. As a result, they unconsciously strive to emulate masculine goals and values and to obtain the advantages and privileges that accrue to members of the male sex. Horney agreed with Adler that many women possess a masculine protest. Masculine protest, as a review, it is a concept described by Adler that women gives expression to a rejection of their feminine condition. As Horney's view about masculine protest, it is the perception easily leads to the neurotic desire to be a man. The desire, however, is not an expression of penis envy, but rather a wish for all those qualities or privileges which in our culture are regarded as masculine. Horney was less interested in differences between men and women than in general psychology of both genders, because culture and society are responsible for psychological differences between women and men. Horney felt that it was so not important to try to find the answer to the question about differences as to understand and analyze the real significance of this keen interest in feminine nature.
Hi everyone! As continuation of Karen Horney's psychoanalytic social theory, let us talk about psychotherapy. Before that, let's have a review on our previous discussions. We already tackled about Freud's psychotherapy, who has his early passive psychotherapeutic technique of free association, which is later adopted by Horney's free association. Then the Adlerian psychotherapy, which aimed to enhance courage, lessen feelings of inferiority, and encourage social interest. Next was Carl Jung's psychotherapy, which has four basic approaches, and lastly, Klein's psychotherapy, which aims to reduce depressive anxieties and persecutory fears. And now, let us proceed to Karen Horney's psychotherapy. Horney believed that neuroses grow out of basic conflict that usually begins in childhood. Neurotic conflict in childhood age may arise vast majority of problems. Horney insisted that these debilitating experiences can almost invariably trace to lack of genuine warmth and affection. And maybe Horney rooted from her story because she experienced own lack of love from her father. And early relationships molds personality development. As people attempt to solve this conflict, they are likely to adopt one of the three neurotic trends: moving toward, against, or away from others. Each of these tactics can produce temporary relief, but eventually they drive the person farther away from actualizing the real self and deeper into a neurotic spiral. The general goal of Horneyan therapy is to help patients gradually grow in the direction of self-realization. More specifically, the aim is to have patients give up their idealized self-image, relinquish their neurotic search for glory, and change self-hatred to an acceptance of the real self. This means that a neurotic patient should give up their way on how they idealize their self-image because it may lead worse to their illness. Instead, they should change their way of thinking and change self-hatred to an acceptance of their real self. Unfortunately, patients are usually convinced that their neurotic solutions are correct, so they are reluctant to surrender their neurotic trends. The three neurotic trends can be cast in favorable terms such as love, mastery, or freedom. Patients usually see their behaviors in these positive terms. Their actions appear to them to be healthy, right, and desirable. The therapist's task is to convince patients that their present solutions are perpetuating rather than alleviating the core neurosis, a task that takes much time and hard work. Patients may look for quick cures or solutions, but only the long, laborious process of self-understanding can effect positive change. Horneyan therapists use many of the same ones employed by Freudian therapists, especially dream interpretation and free association. Horney saw dreams interpretation as attempts to solve conflicts, but the solution can be either neurotic or healthy. As for free association, patients are asked to say everything that comes to mind, regardless of how trivial or embarrassing it may seem. When therapy is successful, patients gradually develop confidence in their ability to assume responsibility for their psychological development. They move toward their self-realization. They will have a deeper and clearer understanding of their feelings, and they can now relate to others with genuine feelings instead of using other people to solve basic conflicts. To sum it up, Horney focused recognizing patients' defenses and discovering their functions and consequences. The purpose of therapy is not to help people gain mastery over their instincts, but to lessen their anxiety to such extent that they can dispense with their neurotic solutions. For Horney, the ultimate goal of therapy is to restore the individual to himself, to help him gain his spontaneity and find his center of gravity in himself. That is all for today. Thank you for listening.